To welcome you back to Black Site tonight is a sad day. Football legend Jim Brown has died at the age of 87. First, I would like for you to subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, hit that notification button, but also comment on this video. Jim Brown is probably the greatest American athlete of all times. He's probably still the greatest lacrosse player of all time, but he was also considered the greatest football player of all time, the greatest athlete of all time. But Jim Brown was more than just a football player, an athlete. He was a political activist. When it was tough in the 1960s, when Ali had his championship taken away from him and his livelihood taken away from him for 4 years, it was Jim Brown, Kareem, and a bunch of other athletes who stood by Muhammad Ali, made sure he was taken care of. But Jim Brown still was a political activist after all that. He fought to take black men off the streets with the America I Can movement. Jim fought until he died at the age of 87. But he also did something that athletes didn't do. He crossed over into movies. Not only was he a great athlete, he was an actor, political activist. This man did more in his 87 years than most men could have dreamed of. Jim Brown is a great man, and everybody knows it. You will hear accolades about Jim Brown from months on, years on, because they will talk about him for centuries. This is how great of a man he was. No, all men are not perfect, but if we could live up to what Jim Brown did as an athlete, he gave the most that he had 9 years in the NFL. When he stepped on the movie screen, he gave the best. When he was a political activist and fought for our civil rights, he did the best he could. And Jim Brown was considered one of the athletes who showed other athletes that you're more than just a black man carrying a football, that you could be more to the community, that you can be a man who could step forward and stand for issues that once people said you couldn't. Jim Brown, to me, is the greatest athlete in American history. And I don't care what anybody thinks. You can talk about LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but this guy was extraordinary. 6'2", 6'3", 235 pounds. Could run fast as any athlete in the NFL. But that wasn't the man. He was more of a man off the field than he was on the field. And this is why so many look up to Jim Brown. This is why so many athletes admire Jim Brown, because of the man he was. Over the past 6 months, we lost Bill Russell. We lost Jim Brown. We lost the men who fought for all the athletes that you see today with the big multi-million-dollar contracts. The reason why they have it is because of Jim Brown, Bill Russell, and so many others who fought for them to have generational wealth. But Jim Brown always talked about giving back to the community, making sure those who don't have. And Jim Brown was that man. I hope young people who didn't know much about Jim Brown could now look back on his past. Maybe look at a few documentaries. Read his book. which is a tremendous read. I recommend everybody read Jim Brown's book because he tells you how he maturated over his life. This is a great man. He's one of the few men that I respect in sports and have always respected since I was a kid and read his book. It's sad to see him go because we don't have many men like Jim Brown anymore. This man grew up during a tough time with many other of our great athletes. And he proved to us that he was a real freedom fighter. He wasn't controlled. He put himself out in the 60s when them devils will come hang you, when them devils will put you 6 feet deep. Jim Brown fought for our civil rights. Jim Brown is going to be remembered like Muhammad Ali because those two came together in different sports, two of the greatest of all time. And they put forth an image that young black men should aspire to be. What a sight to see. I'm glad he's going with the ancestors because he will be celebrated by the ancestors and he should be celebrated especially by the NFL, the Cleveland Browns, the black community, because this man was a great man. We have to understand, we have to carry on his legacy because Jim Brown is what we all should aspire to be. I'm sad tonight because I know how much he meant to so many black men, how much he meant to the black community, how many lives he saved, and how many men who really admired Jim Brown. I want to thank you for listening to Black Sight. I hope you subscribe to this channel. Smash that like button, but also share this video.